we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. You can join us also online at wallbuilderslive.com and wallbuilders.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. And David, we've got a lot of folks now paying attention to this issue of how much land does the federal government actually own. Obviously, people very concerned about the standoff at the ranch out in Nevada and the tactical teams, and feeling like the feds were they were aiming guns at American citizens. Without getting too much into the particular guy there and some of the things he was doing that even I had a problem with. If you're grazing on federal land, you ought to have to pay something, I think, if it's public land. But regardless of all that, why does the federal government have so much land?
Well, and that's part of the big questions is where did they get it, how did they get it, and why did they have it, and why aren't they using it? I think we talked before about the fact that 85% of all the energy resources in the United States are held on federal land, and they refuse to do anything with it. So we're having energy problems that could easily be fixed with that. The amount of energy resources they own would retire the federal debt in a heartbeat, but they refuse to do anything with it. So there's a lot of things, and part of the difficulty with that is as the government gets bigger and bigger, they know less and less about what they have and how to do it, and it's more and more managed by bureaucrats rather than elected officials. And that's one of the things I'm dealing with the committee right now in Congress. We're trying to get a bunch of USDA bureaucrats under control. These guys, I would like to call them petty tyrants, because that is the name we often use when we talk about despicable kind of things. But these guys, they're petty tyrants, but they aren't petty. They have way too much power. And they keep doing things to these agriculture folks and said, sue us all you want. You can't do nothing. We'll outlast you. We can print our own money. There's nothing you can do. I've got immunity. You can't touch it. And when you get folks with that kind of an attitude, it really does become a problem for freedom. And so part of the problem with the Western lands is they've now got so much, they're doing so much with it, and the government has gotten so large, now over 1,000 agencies in government. Most of the members of Congress, this is beyond their control at this point. This is, kind of feed the monster kind of stuff. And that's where it gets scary to me, is this is bigger than anybody realizes. And, aside from Bundy, whether what he did was right or anything else, tell me why the IRS needs SWAT teams.
Exactly.
What in the heck is going on that IRS needs SWAT teams?
And Department of Education.
What are you going to use a SWAT team for in the Department of Education? Give me a break.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a bigger question than just that. But it does revolve around lands, because that's where so much of the riches are. Can you imagine with the state budget of these states if they had all these lands under their control rather than Fed's control? And state governments aren't that great either, but they're not as wasteful and extravagant as the federal government is.
That's right.
And at least some of that would be going toward the use of citizens rather than the use of the bureaucrats in D.C.
Or even just sell it off.
Even just sell and that's what should be done. That was what the design was originally with these things. Once a territory became a state, it was supposed to be their land. And so that was what was supposed to happen with it. It was federal land, but the federal government has made a state out of them, and so it's now state lands, and that's the way it was supposed to be. And the federal government just hadn't honored its contracts, quite frankly.
Well, it's time to get them to honor those contracts. And one of the guys that's on the front line of this battle, been dealing with it for years. We actually had him speak at our Pro-Family Legislators Conference a couple of years ago on this subject. He's a state rep out of Utah, one of the states where the feds have a huge chunk of the land. Ken Ivory with us when we return here on WallBuilders Live.
Hey guys, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders, and I know you hear my dad and Rick talk a lot about our founding fathers, about the original intent of our nation, the constitutional heritage that we have, and really we've seen how far we've slipped away from that. And I know a lot of us, as we hear my dad and Rick talk, think, I wish there was a place that I could go and I could see these documents and I could read and learn about the founding fathers firsthand, see the things they did. And I want to give you some websites today that can help you accomplish that very thing. If you get online, you can go to places like Library of Congress and you can look under their Century of Lawmaking or historical documents. You can go to the Avalon Project, to the Founders Constitution, to Google Books, or even the Internet Archives, or you can just go to WallBuilders' website. We have a section for our library, and under that section we have different subgroups for historical documents, historical writings, even a place where you can get helpful links to find out more information about other websites where you can do research for yourself and find the truth for yourself. Friends, this is the time that we need to know who we are and where we came from. WallBuilders.com is a great place to go.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Our guest today, our good friend, State Representative Ken Ivory from Utah. Good to have you back, Ken.
Great, good to be with you.
Hey, man, a lot of things coming to a head here. This is something you've been way ahead of the curve on in terms of the land out in the West that the feds have not let go of. Folks that have never really thought about that issue now thinking about it because of the Bundy Ranch situation. And, I'm sure, both of us would say, as we would say in legal circles, these were probably bad facts, not really the case you'd want to take to the Supreme Court with them not being willing to pay taxes or fees or whatever. But it definitely raises the issue of why do the feds have this land anyway? This really should be either state land or it should be sold to guys like Clive and Bundy and let them have it for cattle if they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, that's right, Rick. If you build a house on a bad foundation, it doesn't matter if the carpenter or the electrician or the plumber was wrong. You start pointing fingers. You got a bad foundation, you got a bad house.
That's right.
And we got a bad foundation. Constitutionally, the principles are liberty, property, self-governance, and that yields peace and prosperity. You get away from that where the federal government had the duty to dispose of the land. I mean, Rick, Nevada's Enabling Act is the exact same as Nebraska. It was done within 3 weeks of each other. Nevada's actually a state first. Nebraska goes from more than 30% public land down to 1%. Their Enabling Act is the same as Utah. It's the same as North and South Dakota, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama, on and on and on. Whereas the federal government will extinguish title. The states, so people point to it and they say, look at the Nevada Constitution. Yeah, they look at 6 words where it says, forever disclaim all right and title, and then they forget the rest of the sentence, Rick, where it says, until title thereto shall have been extinguished. The federal government's a trustee. The states gave them a quitclaim deed. They gave them clean title so they could dispose of the land, extinguish title to the land faster and for more money, because the faster they dispose of the land, guess what? The states get to tax the land. They govern themselves. They educate their own kids, care for their own communities. The more money they sell for the land, Rick, there's another provision in the Enabling Act that nobody even looks at that says 5% of the proceeds of the sales of public lands, which shall be sold, shall be paid to the state for the support of the common schools. So you read the whole document, as you know, you read it in context, you see the whole terms, then you look at the course of dealing, the history. The promises are the same at statehood to transfer the land as all the states east of Colorado. They keep the promise in one half. Why the difference with the western states? And that's the question nobody can answer.
Man, so many huge issues here. And I remember when you came to our legislators' conference and spoke about this a couple of years ago, and then we had you on the radio, I guess, last year to talk about it as well. And you showed the map of the percentage of land still owned by the federal government, controlled by the federal government in these western states, and specifically Nevada. As you said, Nebraska went from whatever it was, 30-some-odd% down to 1% because the feds did what they were supposed to do with that state. Nevada is still, 85%, something like that, controlled by the feds?
According to the Congressional Research Service, it's 81% federally controlled.
81%. So, for folks to just to start with this issue, just think about that. The federal government controls 4 out of 5 acres in the state of Nevada. That's hard to even fathom. So if they control it and they still have it, and yet in the beginning, and it's not much different for you guys in Utah, it's still, 50% or something like that?
Yeah, we're 67.
67, man. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's these huge pieces of property that the feds, when the deal was made, everybody understood the feds would over time sell off that land or give it back to the state, and so many benefits to that. You pointed out before when you were on the program how much revenue could be raised by the feds if they would just sell off all this land. We could take a big chunk out of the national debt.
Yeah, and so your listeners will understand the constitutional principle. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the Constitution says, Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make needful rules and regulations respecting the territory, and nothing in the Constitution shall prejudice any claims of the United States or of the particular states. Well, Congress shall have the power to dispose of. They read it today as saying, well, that means we can keep it forever. This whole question started in 1780, and they understood that we never set up a federal government that would just be this big land baron, in essence, what we're seeing in the Bundy situation, be an occupying force in the middle of states and counties. That's not our system, Rick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, and it seems like now people are paying attention. I mean, you may have felt like a voice in the wilderness for a long time as you've worked on this issue, because the western states, every state out there, you guys have an interest in making this happen, but the other states have just ignored it. So it's been hard, I would imagine, for you guys to get a majority in Congress to force the Bureau of Land Management to do something on this. You think that's going to change now?
Well, yes, this is so much bigger than one rancher in Nevada. When you have $150 trillion in minerals locked up in the federally controlled lands, when you have more recoverable oil than the rest of the world combined locked up in these federal lands, when you have failed federal forest policies and management policies destroying the environment, catastrophic wildfires that are burning up millions of animals, destroying watershed and habitat for decades, there is an environmental and an economic urgency that as Congress continues to dither, they're going to run out of runway and need real solutions. And this, Rick, is the only solution big enough to educate our kids, better care for the environment, grow the economy locally and nationally.
And reduce the size of government.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah, and imagine you do that, or imagine, you'll appreciate this, Rick, you do that by honoring the fundamental principles that this nation was founded on: liberty and property and self-governance.
Stay with us, folks. Ken Ivory is our guest, state representative from Utah. Ken, website for you as we're going to break, please.
Yes, AmericanLandsCouncil.org, American Lands with an S, Council.org.
And we'll have a link to that at WallBuildersLive.com to make it easy. Go check it out, find out what you can do to help. We'll talk to Ken about that when we come back. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In several decisions over recent years, the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that it is unconstitutional for the government to encourage religion. Did our founding fathers agree with this? Consider the words of Henry Lawrence, a signer of the Constitution and a president of Congress. Henry Lawrence declared, "I had the honor of being one who framed that Constitution. In order effectually to accomplish these great ends set forth in the Constitution, it is especially the duty of those who bear rule to promote and encourage respect for God and virtue, and to discourage every degree of vice and immorality." Founding Father Henry Lawrence believed that the goals of the Constitution could not be fulfilled apart from a fear and a respect for God, and that it was therefore the duty of government to encourage this among the people.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. State Representative Ken Ivory from Utah is with us. He's been leading the charge on the issue of federal lands in the western states, the massive amount of land being controlled by the feds. As we were going to break, Ken, you just laid out the benefits so succinctly. It's huge. This is not a small issue. This could be a solution to major problems for our nation right now. How is Congress responding, and what are the steps they need to take to actually do what you're talking about?
Well, it's a great question. Step number one is educate. Where people have been laboring under this misapprehension that somehow this is okay, or maybe they just didn't know. Education is the foundation of everything. And Rick, we all can do that. Everybody can do that. Get to the American Lands Council website, like the American Lands Council Facebook page. There are key points on there. There are videos. We just did a show with Glenn Beck in Fox News and Al Jazeera and on and on. There's all kinds of content there to share. So we all can take ownership in educating if we really want to change fundamentally the system and the trajectory that we're on. Step 2 then, Rick, is negotiation. And that's where the representatives that we hire and put in government, in our Republican form of government, you start by negotiating and get the facts on the table and start working on an orderly transition. The next step after that is legislation at the local, state, and national level. South Carolina, Rick, did a resolution supporting the transfer of public lands. We're looking to Texas next year to do the same thing, hopefully, and other states throughout the East. Republican National Committee, Rick, just did a unanimous resolution supporting the transfer of public lands. And then we start moving toward Congress and getting legislation introduced. And that, when people have the education, they have the knowledge and the courage, they start pushing that political pressure to this that is a real solution, where Congress has just been kicking cans. We start pushing them toward real solutions. And then failing that, Rick, litigation is the fourth avenue. And Utah this year, we appropriated $2 million to start building the litigation case. We're going to build it very carefully and methodically. We're not just going to run off and file something tomorrow. We're building the very substantive, substantial case. But so education, everyone can do that. Negotiation, that's where you hire people and give them courage. Legislation, same thing. We delegate our governing power to the people we hire, and then require that they take the steps that are in line with our founding principles. And then litigation, we're moving. So last week, Rick, we met with leading legislators, representatives. We had speakers of the House, Senate leadership, legislators, county commissioners around the West, meeting to start coordinating our efforts on this four-step approach.
Ken, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I'm going to compare you to a woman here, Esther. Such a time as this, bro. I'm telling you, you are in the position you're in for such a time as this because you articulate this so well. Obviously, you're strategic about it. I mean, this is a well thought out game plan. There's a strategy here to get this done. Real quick, you mentioned something I had not even thought of. Just these resolutions coming from states that are not in the same boat you're in, South Carolina or even Texas. I mean, we're down to 1.9 or something percent. But our states need to be helping you guys to get this thing done right. And you mentioned the resolutions. A lot of folks are going to be a lot of our listeners will be going to their state conventions for their political parties, Republican, Democrat, whatever. And at those state conventions, or even at their county and senatorial conventions, they could pass a resolution for you, right? And encourage, through their state party, their state officials to get on board with this.
Exactly right. In fact, Rick, where this came from, we started studying the committees of correspondence from 1772 to 1776. You know, they didn't just wake up on July 4th, 1776 and say, hey, I got a great idea. Let's go poke the British in the nose.
Right.
They had been building this network, this committees of correspondence, and the way they educated and built the unity was through resolutions all through towns and cities and counties and colonies. And that's kind of where that came from. So at the American Lands Council website, there's a resources tab, and under the resources tab, you'll find all kinds of information, but there's a resolution tab. And you'll see resolutions from school districts and counties and chambers of commerce and cities and South Carolina and the National Association of Counties. Pull one of those resolutions down and get that moving. When people have to raise their hand and vote, you're learning at a much higher level than sitting there passively listening.
Yeah.
And that's where these resolutions are powerful. So number one step people can do, everyone can do, is educate. On the website, there's key points, know and share. Like the Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter. We've got hashtags, hashtag transfer public lands and hashtag bigger than Bundy. And light those things up. That's how we educate. And then the last thing, the other thing people can do is delegate. You know, we are the government of the people, by the people, for the people. And if we're hiring people, Rick, that just have nice hair or sound cool, shame on us.
Yeah.
But if we hire people that know that there are real solutions big enough, in line with our fundamental principles, that's our job. Then the final thing people can do, Rick, is on the website, money and manpower. You know, if you can volunteer, put your information in there, let us know. If you can spare a couple bucks a month, you know, the more people doing that, it takes some resource to educate and move this move this down the line, but it's so gratifying. You know, Revelations 3:8, I've set before you an open door that no man can shut. You have little strength, but you've kept my word and not denied my name. And Rick, I'll testify to you right here, brother, that the Lord is opening doors. As we honor the principles that upon which he established this nation, we can get back to the peace and prosperity that this was founded on. But that's where it starts. We can't disregard the constitutional equation and expect the blessings of liberty and prosperity.
No doubt, man. And even as you were talking just then, I was pulling up the website and the resources you're talking about. Folks, this is so easy to use. I mean, multiple options on the resolutions from these different organizations that have done them, the videos, the times that Ken's been on Beck and other programs, so you can share those. As I said, he articulates it so well. If you just get it in front of people, get his message in front of people, we can win this thing, and it can have a huge impact on every state. It's not just the western states that will be impacted by this, because it'll help us reduce the federal debt. It'll decrease the size of these out-of-control agencies. Ken, sometime we'll get you back and just talk about the ridiculousness of having a SWAT team at the Bureau of Land Management. I mean, these federal agencies that have these militarized groups is just completely out of control. John Funn had a great article on it. We're going to try to get him and others to talk about that as well. But I know you're on top of those things as well. I just got to praise you, bro. I'm just so impressed with where this thing has gone. You guys have organized it incredibly well, and we want to get you some manpower and some help to get it done. Encourage all of our states to do this. Thank you for your time today, and thanks for waging this battle.
Hey, Rick, my pleasure. Thanks for being in the fight.
All right, guys, that's Ken Ivory from Utah. Go check out the website at AmericanLandsCouncil.org. AmericanLandsCouncil.org. Great resources there. Great opportunity for you to make a difference for the future of our country. Stay with us. Back in a moment with David Barton. People all over America are concerned about the course and culture of our nation. We know in our hearts that the number one priority should be a return to biblical foundations. We know in our heads that we should also be returning to history, and I'm holding in my hands what may be the most powerful tool I've ever seen for doing both of those things. A biblical foundation and the history of our nation is found in the Founders Bible. It's an amazing new publication, I think probably the most important publication that WallBuilders has ever been a part of. It actually gives you a chance to go back to the history of America in the Bible, to be able to trace back where the founders got the ideas for creating the most successful nation in history. It's a gorgeous work. It's 2,208 two-color biblical pages, as well as a ton of full-color inserts, over 330 pages and 40 major articles from David Barton and others teaching us about that history, telling the story of the founders, and at the same time being able to reference those biblical foundations. It's absolutely the perfect gift at this time in our nation's history when we so need these biblical foundations. Check it out at wallbuilders.com. It's called The Founders Bible.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. We're back with David Barton now. And David, man, Ken does such a great job on this issue, obviously well-versed on it. It's, of course, near and dear to his heart because his state is affected by it as much as anybody.
Well, you know, he talks several times in there about enabling acts, and we probably ought to put the brakes on for a minute and say, okay, what's an enabling act? You want to take a shot at it? What's an enabling act?
Well, it's sort of like your, almost like your articles of incorporation as a state. I mean, it's saying here's how we're going to come into the union, here's what makes us a state, and it's sort of like a contract between the previous, would you say, I guess it would include territories or even a state that splits.
Yeah, that's right, and that's exactly it. Is the Articles of Incorporation, and in the case of Utah, and it's really a contract between the federal government and the territories, and they're often called an enabling act for a state, not the state, for a state of Utah. And so what they're saying in 1894 is, all right, we're passing this act that authorizes you to do certain things. You have to set up a Republican form of government. You have to have 40,000 in your territory. You have to set up a judicial system that looks like this. And so it really is the contractual obligations. And particularly in the case of Utah, unlike a lot of other states, it said you can't become a state if you have polygamous or plural marriages. They have to be barred forever in your Constitution. So if you want to add that to your Constitution, you can become a state in the United States. So that's part of what an enabling act is and does. And he's right. The enabling acts for Nebraska and Nevada right at the same time, and all these states. And how come they gave the lands back to Nebraska and not to Nevada? And that's where the government is not honoring its contract. And as he went through and explained that, the government is supposed to honor that. Now, if you only take one clause out of the line, as he pointed out, you can say, well, the government is supposed to hold it. No, they're not. They're not supposed to. As he pointed out, I love the term that he used on that. The federal government is not supposed to be a land baron. That's not what they exist for. This is land that was given to that state as a contract with that state, for that state, and for the people in that state. And so that's where it's supposed to be going. Now, and by the way, just, for a little bit, I'm sure that Ivory, Ken wasn't offended by being compared to a woman, especially Esther. I mean, he's from the West, and in the West, I've been rodeos all over the place out there. And in the West, we cowboys have a saying that says we're tough enough to wear pink. That's what we use at rodeos, bull riders for breast cancer. So if we can wear pink, I think he can handle being called Esther and not be bent out of shape over it.
Yeah, he seemed pretty confident in his manhood. I wasn't worried.
That's right. That's right. But, it is really good. I've seen him a lot now on even national programs because he is such a good spokesman and he is so well informed and so articulate on what the law actually says. And this is another way that we have to get the federal government back under control. Unlike his 4-step plan, you've got education, negotiation, legislation, litigation. But look, they've laid it out and their own plan for this. And Lord willing, we'll get the federal government back under control in these areas as well.
Well, check out the website, folks. We'll have a link today at wallbuilderslive.com. Thank you for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided forever.